Thank you, Deshan, for that very kind presentation. And I have to confess that after seeing those marvelous pictures, I'm not sure I'm going back to Mexico. I think I'm stopping by Hawaii just for a few days. And thank you so much for having me here. It's a real honor. It's a real honor to be here, and it's been grateful. I'm feeling very grateful for hearing all of the different speakers that have been presenting over the last 2 days. I've been hearing concepts as sense of belonging, happiness, very discussed concept, identity, engagement, and I'll try to talk to a few of them in my presentation. But first of all, I want to make sure that I understand that I'm not an expert in Bhutanese culture. I've been here for 5 days, and I've tried the food, and I tried the clothes, and I walk around the city, I visited the temples, and I even throw the dice in the temples. But I'm very far from knowing what Bhutan is. And with that humility, I would like to present the following slides about our work and what we do at Happy City. But first, before starting, and excuse me if I'm not singing because I don't have a beautiful voice like John, but I would like to ask you if you can help me with a little experiment. Would you? 30 seconds. Okay, so I want you to look around, and I want you to find a person who you don't know, close to you, so we don't create a mess in the room. And please introduce yourself and tell that person, what is your happy place? My happy place, for example, for me, is my living room with my dog and my husband. That's my happy place. So please introduce that to the other person, and then take a selfie so that you can capture that moment. Okay? I'll let you know when it's time. Go. Okay, time for the selfie. If you haven't taken the selfie. Great, thank you. Okay. So I hope that by now you have a new friend. I know that it can be so exciting to keep taking selfies. Okay, so I hope that by now you have a new friend. And I want to ask you a very simple question. Who feels less connected than 5 minutes ago? Hands, who feels less connected? Who feels more connected than 5 minutes ago? Hands up. That is exactly what we are trying to do in Happy City. We are trying to find the ways that we enable the different social connections, that we promote this through the design of the city. So I guess you're feeling more connected. I guess you're feeling a little bit happier. So before starting, I want to tell you a little bit about the days that I've spent in Bhutan. So I've been walking around the city, and I've been asking people, what do they think about happiness? What's happiness for them? For some of them, it's playing and laughing. For some of them, it's having a nice meal with friends and family. For some of them, it's just hanging out with family and friends. There are very small things in the city that reminds us why happiness is important. But there are also things that are larger than ourselves, that reminds us that we are part of something bigger and that we are nothing in the universe. And I had just an experience here in Bhutan that it made me realize that social trust is so important here. So, quick story. I've been working for 2 weeks in India, and I left my computer charger there. So, you know, like for us Westerns, the computer is like our life. So I arrive here, and I see that I don't have my charger, and I'm looking for an Apple Solution store. So I find the Apple Solution store, I take a cab, I go to the Apple Solution store, and then I start trying to pay with all of my possible credit cards from Mexico and from Canada. Because yes, I travel from Mexico and Canada a lot. So none of my credit cards were working. Or my debit cards. I couldn't have access to cash. And the guy in the Apple store tells me, don't worry, ma'am, you've got a presentation to prepare, so take the charger and we'll figure out about the money later. So he just lent me the charger, give me the charger, a total stranger that he had never met, that he was talking to for 5 minutes. And I was able to go, and I instantly feel happier. Why did I feel happier? Because my stress levels dropped down immediately. Now I could concentrate in what I needed to do. So thank you, Bhutan, for that personal experience, because that's how I start feeling how you guys are feeling on a daily basis. So I work at Happy City, and Happy City was started by Charles Montgomery after he wrote this book, Happy City. After 10 years of research, trying to understand what makes cities happy, what makes people happy from all over around the world, and collecting evidence from different disciplines, he decided that he needed to create an interdisciplinary group to consult, to address these issues, because one person wasn't enough. So now I'm part of a group of experts in urban planning. There are architects, there are anthropologists, experts in communications, that we are all work together trying to understand how we can help different cities around the world. And this is some of the cities that we have been working on. Recently, I haven't added India to it, but we've been working a lot with India and also understanding the local context. We have been working with really large companies around the world, but also with small ones, with developers in our home city, in Vancouver, in Mexico, in Denver, in some countries in Europe. And what builds our slogan is that cities should build happiness. And happiness is not a unicorn and rainbows. It's not that bubbly feeling that we might have after we see a rainbow. Happiness is much more complex than that, and we have been discussing about this concept. The way that we address it in Happy City is we sum up 3 elements: the healthy years, psychological well-being with the 6 different values that Dr. John Helliwell mentioned in the morning, and then subjective well-being. How do I feel in the present moment? And we have been gathering evidence from different disciplines to understand how happiness is addressed from those different disciplines. So we are mainly evidence-based company. We gather evidence from public health to understand what makes us physically healthier, from psychology to understand how the built environment, how the way we move into the city affects the way we feel, to understand how the city affects our nervous system and our brains, to understand how we behave with others and what makes us do the choices that we take. And also very important, what connects us to other people. We studied from the anthropology and sociological approach, what are the main things that makes us social human beings, and other disciplines that we add to this recipe for urban happiness. So after working with all of this evidence, we created this well-being circle, well-being strategy, that is mainly composed of 8 principles. Core needs, addressing the main things that we need to live: house, home, food. House, food, and also health. And then sociability being one of the most important components. So how do we relate to each other? Joy, yes, it's very important to feel pleasure in our everyday lives. Health, how I feel physically, but also how I feel mentally. Equity, the kind of access that everybody has, no matter gender, no matter background, no matter religion. Ease, how easy it is to get around the city. Is it accessible or not? Resilient, yes, we have to make sure that we're using the resources that we have today, but also making sure that we are prepared for the challenges that are coming tomorrow. And one of the most important ones that probably it's going to resonate a lot with you, meaning and belonging. Because the sense of belonging is something that is going to build strong communities. And over the last days, I've been trying to understand what makes Bhutan so happy. Because even though you claim to be very happy, we are still appearing in the number 97 in the happiness index. But I have something to say. You're doing great in terms of social relationships. You're also doing great in terms of meaning and belonging. So what I question a little bit is how are we doing in terms of physical health, in access to house, to food, and then the ease of moving around the city, if it is accessible or not. The good news, as I was telling, is that the key ingredient for happiness is social relationships, and you're doing great in that side. So people who are connected can live 15 years longer than people that are isolated. People who are connected are more likely to survive cancer. People who are connected want to participate in the government and in the public life. And it's not only about the meaningful relationships that we have with family or friends, it's also about the social encounters, the casual social encounters that we might have with other strangers in the city. That's why walking is so important, because we're not going to have those social encounters in the car. And from those social encounters and from those family relationships, we start building trusting cities. And trusted cities are the most happiest cities. They are not the ones that have more money or more access to resources, are the ones that have that trust more in people. So life satisfaction is directly correlated in trusting neighbors. And why is this important? Because indirectly, besides being connected and being happy, this also addresses GDP. So we don't have to focus in GDP, but indirectly, we're going to increase the economy of the country. And social trust saves lives. I'm going to tell you a little story that is very close to my heart. Mexico 2 years ago, there was a very big earthquake, 7.1 magnitude tremor. 44 buildings fall down, and 200 people died. But the thing is that there were different things that were happening across the city, and the different neighborhoods reacted in a different way. More people died in Xochimilco, the one that is on the right, and less people died in Roma. What was the difference? The difference. Roma is a connected place. Xochimilco was disconnected. And I'm going to address the connectivity part in 3 different ways. Connected socially, connected physically, and digitally connected as well. Those were the 3 main aspects that actually made a difference. It was easier to get medical services to the more connected parts of the city, and it was much more difficult, and it took days to get to Xochimilco. Social support was crucial. People, no matter age, gender, social, or economic level, they were out there in the street helping in whatever they could. Digital connections, the people that were really using Twitter and social media, they rapidly organized, and they were saying where were the centers, where the medicines were, and how to organize people around the city. And one very important thing, physical accessibility. Most of the streets were covered with rubble from the earthquake, from the falling buildings. The only vehicles that could get across were bicycles. So bicycles were actually the ones getting the medicines from one part to the other to the city. So yes, design matters. The more connected we are, the more resilient we are going to be. Design can either bring us closer together, or it can drive us apart. And design, we know that it influences the way we move, the way we feel, and the way that we behave. And I'm going to start showing a little bit of the work that we've been doing and to promote kindness and sense of belonging. And I'd like to start with the public realm. So this is an experiment that we did in Portland. So this was a person pretending to be, sorry, I lost the word, a lost tourist. She pretended to be a lost tourist, and she was just holding this map and just like trying to see if anyone would help. And we wanted to know what was the reaction of the persons, if they would help in very active edges where there were stores, shops, and there was a lot of people, and then also in blank edges. So we compared these parts of the city. The active edge is the one in the left, and then the blank wall is the one on the right. Not surprisingly, more people stopped to help her in the active edge. Why? Because when there's more things happening, so where there are more people in the streets, we are kinder. So yes, active edges equals to kinder pedestrians. And I have a good news for you. The center of Bhutan is exactly doing this. There are a lot of active edges. It enables us to walk. It promotes kinder approaches and behavior in between people. One of the things that we have been studying is that shoppers are more likely to walk up to 800 meters where they are walking through active edges than when they are walking through a blank wall. So yes, we've been finding a lot of active edges in the center of Bhutan, but walking around the city, I also found this kind of walls that apparently they are starting to come up as gated communities. So this is kind of a red light for us not to keep building these big walls, because besides making it a little bit unsafe, it also is gonna decrease the ability for people to walk. This is another experiment that we conducted. We wanted to measure how people react in very beautiful, natural, and colorful environments and compared that to to a little bit of hostile and environments that were mostly gray. So we took people in the city to two different intersections. One is a rainbow crosswalk that is part of a neighborhood and is part of its identity. And the other one was just 2 blocks away, but it doesn't really shows us anything. It doesn't portray anything, no identity. So people were reporting to feel more trust in the rainbow crosswalk, and they were more caring as well. And the same thing in an alley that had nature compared to an alley that didn't have nature. We took people, and they were reporting that in the alley with nature, they were feeling happier, they were feeling more trusting, and more caring. This means that they just not only walk there with this feeling that I don't belong here, I'm just walking through the street, I actually belong here. So that's the difference in terms of what color and nature does to people. And you have great examples here. I run into this wonderful garden just besides Shorten Memorial. And these are the kind of things that we can do by ourselves and the community can get their hands on so that we can start treating nature in a different way. We have the opportunities. We have the connection with nature. Let's not lose it while it's developing. And there are also some opportunities to get rid of the fences. There's no need, if it's a safe city, to have these fences. We need to start trying to promote accessibility and cross through those sites that have never been explored before. So please, lose the fences. Let's not forget about connectivity. Driving drives down happiness. We all know that. And there's a lot of cars here. And I believe that Dr. Gummy was the one that was presenting that half of the pollution and the GHG emissions are partly because of public transport. And yes, driving can make us angry because we spend a lot of time commuting and less time with our family. So right now, there's a big opportunity in Bhutan in the sense that we have the space to diminish the use of the car, increase public transport, and increase maybe the use of the bike. And I found that in each and every bus of the city, there's this sign, take a ride and be happy. I want to provoke here a thought. And what if we change take a ride and be happy to take a bike and be happy? Just a thought. Why? Because riding a bike makes us happier. People report feeling more joy, less fear, less rage, and less sadness. And I know that you are not going to be able to get in bike to every single part of Bhutan because of the geography, of the topography. But at least through the center, through the neighborhoods, let's try to increase our biking and walking. And talking about what the car impacts in a negative way, air pollution can have the same effect on happiness as losing a loved one or being unemployed. Something is happening in Mexico City this week. It has reported the worst air quality in years. Nothing seen before. It's almost like Delhi. My husband is actually taking my dogs today, and they are moving to another city for the weekend until it starts raining. We were expecting rain 2 weeks ago, and that actually decreases the pollution, but it didn't happen. We were trusting that the climate and that the weather was going to be very nice to us, but it wasn't. So it's not about just leaving it to the weather or to the natural environment. We have to also be taking responsibility about our actions. We are doing a great job in the center of Bhutan in terms of walking. There are stairs and there are also ramps so that people can get around. But I've also found that there are some barriers that diminish this opportunity. So maybe you can walk for 200 meters, but then it's impossible to cross the street. So let's try to get rid of these small steps that are going to affect mainly seniors and disabled people. Walkable design and access to quality transit are vital to those who don't drive. I want to talk about a little experiment that we did in Mexico. So we were assessing 2 major urban parks, and we were assessing pathways as part of this project. So we asked disabled auditors to help us with that. We developed the methodology, they assessed it, they give us feedback for the methodology, and then they were the ones saying, is this good or bad? It was a different approach, and Christina talked to this. It's important that we are not designing from a person that has all of these physical abilities to walk throughout the city. We need to consider people that are having some impairment. And the things that they mentioned the most was that they need smooth surfaces, very smooth surfaces. places to sit, and also 0 barriers. And this includes the barriers that might be at the site level, like branches that haven't been trimmed, for example. For a blind person, that can be actually very dangerous. And you know, when we walk around the city, we remember the extreme highs, what makes us really happy, and also the extreme lows, like going to the dentist. I know for sure that I'm really panicked about going to the dentist. And it's a difference, and we can make a difference if we choose to have this kind of urban spaces, for example, this alley that is completely unsafe, that you wouldn't walk through it, or have a really magical place that you can activate. And then after activating, you can see if it works and then start programming the city. So it's not about only designing, it's also about finding the right activities that are gonna come along with this design. You have wonderful places downtown at the Clock Tower Square. Actually, this kind of configuration of benches improves sociability. Why? Because we are so used to the benches being like one aligned to each other. But when we put them together in 90 degrees or close together, then we promote a conversation. We promote people to start engaging with each other. There's wonderful opportunities for people to sit here, to enjoy, to have a nice evening, but we need to activate it. I've walked only 3 times, and I want to recall this. I'm not an expert what's happening here in Bhutan, but if we manage to find the things that are going to activate these spaces, then people are going to connect on a daily basis, and we're going to be more resilient. And also design through a gender lens. Why is this important? So in Vienna, they conducted this study. They tried to measure the patterns in a small park about where would girls and boys go, where were the places that they would spend most time. So what we found is that girls are more likely to stand in platforms. They like to have a complete view of the place in order to feel safe. They also like to have a lot of sitting spaces. They are likely to be taking care of the little brother. So as long as you have sitting spaces along with playgrounds, then you create this kind of coexistence in between girls that might be in between 14 and 17 years old and the little children. So there are strategies that we can start implementing to make a gender equity city. And I don't know about all of the ladies that are here, but I've gone to the washroom a couple of times, and there's the biggest line, and we have to wait. And just considering, not understanding that women need more bathrooms, more washrooms than men is not addressing the design in an equitable way. So just a solution. And we have to make sure that there are spaces for everyone, for children, for seniors, and for teenagers as well, and for adults. And in these spaces, it's important that we start considering that identity is not just built in the buildings. It's in our everyday lives, in the different things that we pursue, in the different festivals, in the recreation activities that we do. Place attachment drives GDP growth. So again, we are not focused on GDP. We are focused on happiness, on sense of belonging, on trying to bring people together, and automatically GDP is going to grow. What contributes to place attachment? 1, the perception of aesthetics. So how beautiful it might be the place, the social offerings, the programming, the activities that are happening, and then the openness, how safe it is and how welcoming it's for different people with different backgrounds, different ages, different gender. And it's important to consider in a city, in a country, that it's deeply guided by its spirituality to be working and doing things that are larger than ourselves. This is what connects us to Earth, to people. This was one of the experiments that we conducted in a project at Happy City. We wanted to measure how people were feeling before and after participating in it's called a cleaning day. So they would help to plant trees, they would help to repair the sidewalks, they would help to water the plants as well. So we conducted these surveys before doing it and after doing it. So guess what? People were feeling more attached to this place after working in the site because they care, because they were more connected. They reported feeling happier, more trusting, and more caring. So let's not leave everything to government and to administration. Let's get our hands dirty and be part of everything that needs to be done in the city. This is one of the things that happened in Cicla, Stockholm. In terms of sense of belonging, they wanted to create this neighborhood that was the home for artists, but also it was the place where they would work. So besides being the home, they had their workshops in the ground level. So it created a really strong community. People were all the day, all the time there. So it was working 24/7. There were no dead moments. It wouldn't become a ghost city after working hours. And it can happen either in the city, at the city level, or it can also happen in our homes. The more we are connected, the more that we volunteer, the more that we are part of this daily programming, the more we are going to start feeling belonging to that community. So I'm going to jump into this project that we have been developing for 3 years now. Happiness starts at home. This is a little story. This is our friend Rob in Vancouver. So Rob moved to this amazing building, 20-story building, and it had like 12 townhouses in the ground level. He decided he wanted a great view, so he go and bought an apartment that was in the 10th floor. But he wasn't happy. After 3 months, he just was watching what was happening in the townhomes, and all of the people in the townhomes were having parties, they were having barbecues, they were playing volleyball, and he was all alone in his house. And he's like, I need to do something. So he decided to change to one of the townhomes. After 1 year, he reported to have 7 friends that were close as family. And after 2 years, he was taking vacations with his friends. He was much more happier when he was connected with people, when there was an environment that actually promoted for him to make those social connections that were missing in the high-rise. So this was exactly what we started looking at. What's happening with the high-rises? Why, as we move into denser communities, we are losing this sense of interaction, of bonding that happens in the ground floor. We know that isolation is a bigger killer than diabetes. It has higher risk of heart attack and stroke, and boosts risk of dementia by 64%. You might probably not be hearing a lot of isolation here in Bhutan since you are very connected, but I went through some of the statistics, and there's quite some depression. From the total cases of depression, just 5% go to the hospitals. It's still seen as something that shouldn't be shared with the rest of the population. So it's happening. The only thing is that we don't notice it. So we started reviewing what was happening specifically in Vancouver. Through the Connection and Engagement report, they were very interested in knowing how people were connected to their neighbors, to their community, and to the larger city. And they started understanding that people were connected as family to 2 or 3 persons, that they were feeling more lonely than they wanted to, that most of the time they wouldn't trust in their neighbors to walk the dog or to get their email, small things that happen on a daily basis. From all of this evidence that was gathered through social engagement, we started also looking at the evidence of the experts, multidisciplinary evidence, and we found that there were like 2 extremes going on. Either we were starting to move into the suburbs or into very high rises, and both of them are very unhealthy for us. In the suburbs, people tend to gain 10 pounds when they move there. They are less likely to connect, they spend twice as much in transport, and in the other part, in the high rises, people feel lonely and overcrowded at the same time. And you might say, how do they feel lonely and overcrowded at the same time? Well, because the only moment where they are with more persons is in the elevator. The elevator is a very awkward moment when you run into 10 persons and you're trying to fight for your space. And then you go to your apartment and you have no connection with anyone else. So we were trying to understand how do we find the balance. And we started a project with BC Housing, SCARP, MyTax, different organizations in Canada. And we went into the evidence to understand how can we make a change. And we created a framework that was based in the well-being principles that we have created in Happy City, but now it was specifically for homes. We concentrated in how do we enable people doing things together? How do we control the sense of exposure? How close we are or afar we are from people? Tenure, are we able to age in that community? That's important because as we age, we build very trusting relationships and we want to stay in that community. Social group size, it's not the same to engage with 150 persons than with 10 persons at the same time. Feeling safe. Safety is one of the concerns that we have in the Western world. Participation, making sure that we are active, that we don't just ask a developer to do something, but we actually can give an input about what we expect of that building. Walkability, making sure that that building is not just alone, that it's connected to the city, and that it has access to transport, to parks, to the social services. Nature, always being in contact with nature. No matter what, nature can be at different levels of the development. And then comfort. Try to use passive techniques instead of just active techniques so that we make sure that people are feeling comfortable. And then culture and values, of course. What are the values that we want to portray in our homes? How do we create identity in our homes? And I just wanted to show you this chart because this is how we usually work. We go from evidence to action. One of the things that I teach at the university, and I always tell my students in architecture, you cannot draw one line if you don't know what that line means. You need to make sure that the spaces that you are building have a purpose, have a vision. That's why we need the evidence. That's why we need the principles and the overarching framework. Then we go into strategies and then actions. And actions can vary from one country to the other, from one city to the other. Actions respond to the local context. And then, of course, we measure. So we had a meeting, a workshop with different people that were working in public health, urban developers, planners, architects, and very creative minds, to make sure that the actions that we were coming to in that toolkit were actually not siloed. So we've been talking about how we are working in Bhutan in different silos. So what we wanted to do in these workshops was bringing everybody together. And we created this, the Happy Homes Toolkit. This Happy Homes Toolkit, of course, works in Vancouver and works in Canada overall because it's gaining evidence from Canada. Right now, we're probably going to be preparing one for India to see exactly how this can be applied in a different context. And I want to mention a few of these actions that actually resemble and resonate with you because you are doing a wonderful job in that sense. You have already developments that are 3 or 4 stories, not more. I think that the tallest that I've counted is 6. That allows us to keep an eye on the street. We keep those 25 meters that one of the speakers was talking about. With 25 meters, we still know how to connect to the other person. We still keep that reference on what's happening. In high rises, we increase anonymity, low participation, and there's low trust. Another one that you are doing perfectly, offering balconies to create those visual connections between residents and the streets. So as Jane Jacobs was saying, the more eyes on the street, the safer it's going to feel. And people who feel safe are more likely to walk in the streets. So that's another positive thing. See, again, the distance, it's very short. So in between 10 meters and 25 meters, we are aware of what's happening in the public realm. And you are creating unique visual identity. This is good because no matter what, you know what matters to you the most. And you want to portray this in the different buildings. And we have to make sure that while we are building and developing the city, that this is kept as a value. But I also see some opportunities. And remember that this is just a recipe, are the ingredients. No recipe is perfect, but you can use the same ingredients and you can have 2 different dishes. So as I go through these images, try to think, how would you adapt these actions or these solutions into your local context? For example, we know that it's important to enable walking, to promote social encounters, and this is going to create more resilient communities. The action would be, if we create mixed-use neighborhoods where houses are within a 5-minute walk of shops, services, and green space and transit, then we are going to promote people to walk. We know that the evidence says that the more amenities that we have in a neighborhood, the more options, it's going to be more diverse, and diverse communities are more resilient. So what if we start thinking of the city as this complex model in which we have amenities at the ground floor, in the 2nd, 3rd level, that's already happening in Bhutan, and then also in the rooftops. And some of them might be open to just the residents of the building. Some of them might be open to the whole community. And then we start playing with those social interactions. We know that people in apartments feel overcrowded. They don't feel that they have a choice to either be closer together or apart. And our friend Ramit Dunbar was telling us that people try to organize in different groups. And this is historical. From the gathering, from what they were, when they were gatherers and hunters, and people are likely to relate with 150 persons. 150 people, I'm sorry. When we try to understand what are the different scales in which social relationships occur, we know that we are able to recognize the faces of 150 persons. We are not going to feel like strangers. But if we want to learn their names, then the ideal group is 40 to 50 persons. And then there's a smaller cluster, family and close friends, in between 6 and 10 people. Those are the people that we can rely on if we are sick, in case of an emergency, if we need anything at all on a daily basis. So the action following this evidence would be try to create housing that is supporting clusters of not more than 12 households. 12 households is more or less 48 persons, the ideal amount of persons so that we can get to learn their names and have a very positive social interaction. We also know from evidence that kids are spending a lot of time in the digital media. So we need to change this. And it's not about prohibiting, but enabling other things. If we create an action in which we design exterior spaces or walls where residents, kids, can co-create art installations, then we're going to get them outside. We're going to get them to physically relate to each other. We also know that participation is crucial, that people that participate are more likely to act in a moment of crisis, and they are more willing to be tolerant and compassionate. So we need to make sure that there's actions that the government reinforces and developers, that they invite future residents into the development of the design of the process. And this is a very important one that has been mentioned before, comfort. People that are comfortable, they are happier, they are more likely to react in a moment of crisis as well. And this is something that one of the architects was showing us yesterday. We need to start studying how the sunlight, how ventilation, how we can use these natural elements in our benefit without increasing the costs of the building. We also know from evidence that people who are close to nature, they appreciate more nature. They are more likely to engage into sustainable living. They concentrate better, and it decreases the stress levels. So make sure that we have nature, not just in the ground level, but in all the levels of the building. And these are few actions that we can talk about programming, activating spaces that are kind of enhancing what we do through the design of the city. For example, have activities where seniors and children can participate together. This is proven to be a very symbiotic relationship. Have activities where people can participate on a daily basis to know what they are feeling, to know what are their conflicts, their challenges. Leave spaces unfinished. Not everything has to be finished 100%. Maybe it's a wall, maybe it's something, maybe it's the garden, maybe it's landscape. If people participate, they will care more about their environment. And also bring people closer to nature. If we start seeing how nature relates to us and how it actually has a very important position in the life cycle, then we are more likely to care about the world around us. The built environment can change us, but also it's our responsibility to change the built environment. We can change it according to the vision that we have, according to the values, and according to the identity that we want to pursue. So let's plan for happiness, let's design for happiness, let's build for happiness. Let's do this for the generations that are already living and for the future generations. Catherine Che.